Welcome to the Westwood Human Rights Roundtable. My name is Melinda Garfield. I'm your co-host and the co-chair of the Westwood Human Rights Task Force.
And I'm Danielle Sutton. I am the co-chair of the Human Rights Task Force as well.
And this is our second episode of our newly formed podcast, where each episode we will discuss what we're working on within the Human Rights Task Force, as well as introduce you to different Human Rights Task Force members and other members of the community. Today, we have we have Lizzie from the library.
Hello.
We're so excited. Lizzie, tell us about yourself and how you got on the task force.
Okay, thank you. Happy to be here. I am Lizzie Mcgovern. I am the freshly new library director, but I've been at Westwood for about 10 years. I was the head of children's services for about 8 years before I took on this leadership role. And in becoming the director, I was going through a lot of our local history and a lot of things that came across my desk, and I was delighted to find this archive of all of this civil rights task force that happened in Westwood in the 60s. And when I was talking to Danielle, as we often do, about what I had discovered, she had mentioned that there was a newly formed human rights task force in town. And I was saying, well, we have a long storied history of this kind of work in Westwood, and I would love to be a part of that. In terms of the library field or point of view, I was, libraries, the tenets of a library is being welcoming and opening to all. So part of that and, our core beliefs and our core values is connected to human rights in that way. We want to make sure that we are part of this task force and part of the community that we can, do this work together.
So, Lizzie, tell us a little bit about, in your role within the library over the past few years, you've had an up-close and personal relationship with some of these community members, as well as a upfront seat as to what kind of goes down in our community. The library is a place for gathering for students as well as adults. Lots of events take place there. Can you tell us a little bit about, your perspective on what's been going on around town?
Yeah. The library is definitely a melting pot because we have senior citizens there, we have the middle schoolers, high schoolers, we have people of all backgrounds using the space at the same time. So over the years, there's everybody is so loud, why can't they go elsewhere? Honestly, that kind of, or I'm so glad the kids are here, but why can't they be more quiet? So even just that different perspectives of the way people are using the library has, there's conflict at times. And different ideas and values of what the library should be used for. So that definitely has happened. I think most people have the best intentions, but over the years, I've gotten to know a lot of the students who come in, and my staff is great. Everybody wants everyone to have the best experience at the library, but this is something that we're all growing and learning as we see the world through our experiences and our perspectives. I never thought twice, when the middle schoolers, we used to have over 150 of them in the building at the same time on a Wednesday afternoon. And for at least 2 hours, it's a whirlwind. And so at the time, we had reached out to community members, youth and family services. We have teen mentors helping out. And, the police used to offer their presence of just coming by. And, that was just always a great experience of, oh, look, we have the communities coming together. And, not many interactions, just the presence. And it only occurred to me, this year that I thought, to certain parts of the population or certain individuals from their experiences, they might see that as a barrier to even come in the building, of, oh no, this is an intimidating place. This is a government building, in the sense where that might be negative connotations to them. And that's something I never experienced in my life, so I didn't think about it. And we had one case a few years ago where, there was, again, we had middle schoolers in the building, we had adults using the space, and it was very loud, and there were some students, using the study space, and, someone might have complained about how loud it was being in there. And so there happened to be a police officer in the building who might have been checking out a book, and a staff member was like, hey, can you come talk to these kids? And they did so. And two of the students were students of color and had, come to me after, and they were really kind of upset and shaken by that experience and that conversation. I was not there that day. And it opened my eyes up to the best intentions of staff trying to make the library an equitable place for everybody. Didn't even realize that bringing somebody into the fold of oh, look, we have this community, member, this is why they're here. And it just had unintended consequences that we didn't see. And ever since then, my eyes were wide open, and I tried to listen to these students and really understand, because I wanted them to get across that the library is a place for everyone. And I wanted to learn from them, and I was so thankful that they felt comfortable to come back and still tell me about that experience. And, and it's brought to my attention, as we talk about growing and learning, we're talking about professional development and how we can do great customer service. And something that I'm looking forward to is, talking about bias training. So I would never think that a presence of a police officer or this or that would make it a reason why I wouldn't go in that building, or that I would be scared or something. So that's definitely something that I'm looking forward to bringing, just to strengthen the great customer service that I do think the library already really has.
And in our first episode, Danielle, we talked about how the Human Rights Task Force is currently working on some of the unmet needs. And that was one of the themes, right? Training.
Right. Exactly. It's one of those things, we have trainings on a variety of topics. And I think that having, anti-bias training and having training around equity and inclusion and accessibility is something that should be happening all of the time, and just kind of like, yep, this is something we do and it grows over time. I actually think like a model, it probably is our police department that has a ton of trainings, and we can learn from them, and we will. But also just looking around again at comparable communities and seeing what types of trainings they're doing for their staff, bringing it here to Westwood, figuring out the money piece, and really prioritizing that so that we all feel like we can make decisions through that lens, and we're meeting the needs of the community in that way. Because again, it's, at least in my experience in Westwood, it has never been about intent to, make someone uncomfortable. It's always with the intention of trying to be a welcoming place. But this is where we can put things into action so that the outcome matches the intention. And that feels really important. I think like the library always seems like a magical place to me. And part of what attracted me to work in town government back in the day in general was this idea that it really was accessible to all, and that as I moved into my professional career, realizing like, wow, there are a lot of places that don't feel that way, and your town hall and your library and your town spaces really are intended to be and should be places where that feels different. So I was joking with Lizzie, like, I remember when the new library opened and the head of the kind of Minuteman Library network came and talked, and I was like sobbing in the back because he gave this like whole wonderful talk about how, from from the first libraries, like the goal is that it is a place where anybody can go and access knowledge and better themselves. And I was like, that is just so beautiful, And
there's a picture book, and I'm not going to remember the author's name, and it's like this beautiful poem, and it's called Dreamers, and it's about the dreamers, and it's her experience as a new immigrated to America, and the first place she went with her children was the library, and like just reading this the books in the children's department and going to story time and like feeling safe and welcome there, and it's like, this is a place I can go. It's free, and I can feel safe here, and and have access to all of these things, and that totally always brings me to tears. And I'm like, that's what we're here for.
It's awesome.
Lizzie, you mentioned, since that time that those brought to your attention that there really are things that we need to be paying attention to. What has the library been doing? Since there was this recognition of that, maybe there are some things that we could be doing even minimally to move the needle forward a little bit on these, just making it more normal to discuss these things. Yeah,
I think that like we are all in the world of, this month is this thing, or, in June we do this for Pride. And I think, that just doesn't suffice anymore, of just like everyone gets their month. So even just with collections and reading challenges and really responding to the needs in the community. So a lot of it has been met with a lot of enthusiasm from families. So last year we started, Beanstack is our way that we track summer reading challenges, and as you all know, and they have options for throughout the year to use it. So you sign in, you log in, and you have like, read these 10 books or read this. And they created one that was called Read Woke, and it was based off of the School Librarian of the Year, Cecily Lewis. And she was a middle school librarian, and she, presented this challenge to the kids of, kind of read outside the walls, read from somebody from a marginalized community and, walk, in their shoes. And it became really powerful. It became a campaign across school libraries for the last couple of years. And then Beanstack was like, hey, we'll do the hard work for you and we'll make this challenge for you. And so it's an ongoing reading challenge that we really blasted last year all out, so that we have, you read a book that's, and it's for all different ages. So we have one through K book list for kindergarten through 6th grade, high school, and then even adults. And so it's, one badge might be, read a book about the Black experience or Asian American or, from the female perspective, all the different, there's like, I think there might be 10 badges total, but I might be wrong. Don't quote me on that. And so it's, the prize is, when you finish, is being, more well-read and open-minded. Mm-hmm. So we did that. And, I was so excited that some of the teachers even in town asked me and Christy, the children's librarian at the time, to virtually, because this was still during our pandemic days, visit some of their classrooms. And this was, 2nd and 3rd grade classes that we zoomed in and we talked about the books. And even for that age level, there are age-appropriate books. They were, one might be about this, Black American girl who's a 3rd grader who lives in Washington, D.C., and she goes on a field trip and loses. So it's not always like this heavy-handed. It's just, hey, look, this family might not look like your family, or this is where they live and this is what they do, but they're just like you in this way. So I think that people sometimes, think of a reading challenge like, oh, those are heavy topics, but it's really cultivated in a way that it's just, you might not pick up that book. So this is a way to encourage you to do that. So I'm really proud of that. It's an ongoing challenge that's still available. And we had a lot of families participate. So that was really great to see, especially when we were doing just book bundles. So we were like, no one could come in the building at the time. So we were like packaging up these Read Woke book bundles for families that requested it.
Speaking of, being asked to be, talking in classrooms, and that this was a group effort, a community-wide effort, right? We'd be remiss to not acknowledge that during that time, and currently, I would say, that there are people who believe that maybe these books aren't appropriate, or that maybe some of the books on display shouldn't be there. Whether they should be in the library or not, that's a different story. But certainly out in the open, how do you I guess bridge the gap, right? Because on one hand, you want to put out these things for people to be access, right? And then on the other hand, some of these things make other people uncomfortable. Yeah. So how do you navigate that?
At the end of the day, at the public library, because the public library is for everybody, you can pick up a book or you don't have to. Mm-hmm. And whether displays, that is a, people do, could argue like, I don't want this up front. But, when I think of it, like we have 6, let's say, display spaces in the library. And if one of them is an ongoing, Read Woke or, a DEI kind of focused display, I'm proud of that. We have 5 other displays that are ongoing about various other topics at one time. But really, the library should have something for everyone, and there should be something that might make you angry, and there's something you should be agreed on, whatever you think of. And that's actually part of our collection development policy, is that, that there's something for everybody. So it's really up to your choice whether or not you want to take out a book, and especially in the children's department, as a parent, you are the ultimate person that will decide what your child takes out of the library. So, I never want anyone to have a bad experience, but it's definitely, there's many different points of view in the world.
Totally.
Even in the last year, when we did November of 2020 doing Read Woke, I didn't think twice about it. And then over the past couple of years, the term woke has now, taken off and means so many more things to so many people. And I'm just saying it to people can be like, what? Okay, no, why are you doing a challenge that has that word in it? And, some libraries have, changed the name of it. And just to understand, we're not trying to be political. This is literally a book list of, everybody, different experiences. And, we haven't gone that, I hope that people recognize that that's not the point of the reading challenge, but even that, how words and language changes and means different things to different people. Absolutely. So we just try to be respectful of that and hear people where they're at. I think the library's goal, and I don't want to speak for the library because I am here as just me, but is we want it to be a comfortable, welcoming place for people to experience and like, okay, there's so many changes in the world and maybe changes that people are upset by or feeling a lot of emotions about. So how can the library be a place where you can come and learn and experience and really kind of digest those changes, and not necessarily that you're going to agree with, but like feel comfortable engaging with it in a really healthy way. And I hope people feel that way. So if they see a display, if they see this, if they want to learn more about something, that's where I would hope that it would become more of like, we want everyone to come together there and not it to be, you know, like, oh, I don't want this there, I don't want that there. It's like, I want everyone in Westwood to know, no matter what you think about, you know, the word woke or something, that come to the library and feel safe and welcome and comfortable, that we respect you and we want you to come to us first as a place to really, like I said, learn and digest and really just kind of take stock and experience, because there's so many changes in the past few years just with the pandemic. So how can we kind of be a rock for you during this time?
Danielle and I used to talk all the time about how we could have a whole podcast about how to navigate the pandemic and how you're feeling.
That's what I mean. And so much of this is rolled together. Even the way like you use the library has changed in terms of, wait, where is it? Outside by the curb? Is it inside? So, and then on top of it, you know, all these really heavy topics. So
I think that's beautiful to have, you know, a well-resourced library that's just reflecting the different experiences of the world around you. And you can choose, like, to stick with what you know and kind of immerse yourself in that. Or you can take chances in this safe place of the library, and you can, you know, check out something that and look into something that is outside of your experience or different. I think that's kind of, it's wonderful, and it encapsulates the whole thing, right? Is like, you know, meet people where they're at, like just offer options, and then people can kind of choose what they choose to do. So I think it's amazing and impressive that the library, you know, continues to offer that, even as things become more polarized. The library is just always there, hanging out in the neutral space and saying, here's what we've got. And I think that's the role too. I think there's something too about like your background working with children, like I mean, and I'm coming from my perspective of also working with children, where you're just like thinking of all these years that Lizzie and I have worked together, where we do like financial literacy programs with early childhood, where you work with kids and with families to talk about money and like how to have those conversations, and thinking about, you know, all the times that we refer families to the library to get books out about things that are happening in their family, whether that's loss.
Bibliotherapy, that's like, I love that term.
It's amazing. And I think, it's really, I think that would fall into the strengths category, right, of what we have going on in town, that people can go to the library and they can talk to a librarian and get a number of materials that they can access that will help them through something that they're dealing with, and they don't have to feel judged in asking for those books and taking that collection, you know, and going through it. That is an amazing resource in Westwood.
I have a good anecdote about Westwood that I think is funny, but also really just shows how the desire. And I think you know this because we did a program with early childhood, and Melinda, I've told you this story. And it was probably like 8 or 9 years ago, and it was, we used to do every November an adoption, celebrate Adoption Families Month. And then when Janet came on board, and I'm speaking for Janet, hi Janet, we were like, you know, why don't we expand that and to be like celebrate diversity in families? So all families, you know, are loved and cherished, and they might look different. And we had such an outpouring of families sign up. And upon going to the event, there wasn't a lot of diversity at the actual event. But I was like, oh, all of these families that were like traditional, I hate to say that word, but you know, the nuclear family, you know, wanted to go to this event that would celebrate all and, you know, expose their kids to like, look, they're a family too. It might be a grandmother and raising, you know, a child. It might have 2 moms, all of these different, and yet there wasn't a lot. But I remember thinking back 9 years ago, like, oh, look, there's that desire to like, yes, we're, you know, a town, we're a community. We want everyone to feel included and recognize that. And we weren't necessarily, and maybe we were there and it wasn't, you know, target, but I always thought that. And I was like, oh, look at how far, you know, I do think we have a lot of great families in town. I do think we are totally moving towards that inclusivity as a strength. I do think it's there. But when you compare that to 9 years ago, it just made me laugh. Where I'm like, oh, we have this celebrate diverse families, and we didn't have as many diverse families.
So I'm, as we do on all of our podcast episodes, I'm going to leave us today with a quote.
Love it.
And this one's good for the topic that we were just discussing. So this one is by John F. Kennedy, and it says, "The rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened." And I
Great.
do believe that we, as a community, even if it's not your direct problem and your rights that are being threatened, it's everybody's. When it's your neighbor, your loved one, your, just people in the community.
Your library patron.
Your library patron.
Yeah.
We need to fight for all of their rights.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So thank you,
Thank
Lizzie, for
you.
joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And you'll catch us again next time on the Human Rights Roundtable podcast.